I dropped the catch off his bowling and he came to me and he said, take off that hat because you're not worthy of wearing that. And he sort of stepped on it and I was broken, I was shattered. I've always hated stats. Who said that 10,000 is a number in any way?
Yeah.
I'm going to decide for myself when I've had enough.
Today on the Home of Heroes, we have someone who's taken batting to another planet. He actually introduced geometry into the game of cricket. We know him as Mr. 360. He's perhaps one of the most loved, not perhaps, but certainly one of the most loved, if not the most loved overseas cricketer in India. And he scored over 20,000 international runs. Good enough? Or you want me to add something else to it?
You can keep going if you want to. I'm enjoying
I can keep
this.
going, I promise you. AB, you've pioneered cricket to where it is today. You've helped revolutionize the game and evolve the game to where it is. And I want to welcome you to the Home of Heroes, man. This is it's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Robbie. It's great to be here. And thanks for the intro. I really appreciate it. I get a bit shy from time to time, especially when people talk about me like that. But look, I've had a very enjoyable career. And I think the main thing was just I had a lot of fun out there. And my connection with India, what has happened, I don't know how it happened, but it's changed my life. And
yeah.
I'll forever remember my great experiences on the field and my connection with the fans of cricket in India.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that, right? But before that, I want to know what is your earliest memory and your introduction to cricket? How did that happen?
Started from a very young age. I have two older brothers. Mm-hmm. They're 6 and 9 years older than me, respectively.
Oh, wow.
So there's a big gap. And it was always a big push for me to sort of compete with them, you know.
Yeah.
So in the backyard, like most other boys, I didn't have TV games or an iPad or any nonsense like that back in the day.
Did they also play cricket? I'm sorry.
They loved cricket as well, yes. They played not internationally. They had potential, probably a little bit more lazy than I was. As I said, I was the youngest, so I was always pushed to work a bit harder, to really lift my game, to try and compete with them. And I think that played a huge role in setting the foundation of my cricket.
Yeah. And in that, was cricket the first game you played, or were there other sports that you played before cricket came along?
It was a combination of quite a few sports. I think golf and cricket maybe sort of started together.
Oh, really?
There was tennis. And rugby,
yeah, there was
a few others. So, but I think cricket and golf were probably the main ones that I just played from a very young age. The age of 3, I think I started hitting golf balls.
Oh, wow.
And not long after, my brothers introduced me to cricket. And as I said, backyard games, we were rolling pitches, we played on the tar roads, dirt roads, everywhere we could find a spot, we would create this cricket game, one-up, one bounce, you know.
Really?
So just lots of fun, different rules, and sort of crafted what you eventually saw on television.
So when did you feel like kind of cricket took over for you? Or because if you started playing golf at the age of 3, that means in the family there was someone playing golf, because otherwise you wouldn't be introduced to it at such a young age, right? So when did that kind of crossroad or intersection come when you had to choose between, say, one of the sports?
That happened much later, actually. I think I was about 16 years old. To come back to quickly the family, we have a sports crazy family, the most competitive people you'll ever meet. And I was the baby in this crazy dynamic. My mom and dad could hardly ever play sports against each other because they would just fight.
Oh, really?
I don't think we ever finished like 9 holes together on a golf course as a family of 5. My dad would just walk off and my mom would go like, no, I'm done with this. Just very competitive, very healthy. I mean, we'd make peace and sort of make up afterwards and have dinner together. Yeah. But on the course and on the tennis courts and wherever we play sports against each other, it was very fierce competition. But anyway, later on in my career, I think I was about 16 when I made the SA schools team, the B side, where I started realizing, okay, now we're sort of coming down to maybe the top 20 to 30 guys in the country of my age group, and I thought, oh wow, I didn't know I was as good in cricket as I thought. And then 17, 18, things started happening. Some doors started opening up. Made the SA schools team, the SA under 19 team, and then had some good tournaments. And I think everything just happened so quickly after that. In the next 12 to 18 months, my whole career changed, and I found myself facing Stephen Armisen, who was the #1 test bowler at the time in my first test match in Port Elizabeth. It literally happened like this.
But you were super focused when you were a young kid in school. I remember reading Faf's book that you were like one of the, you were You aced everything. You aced studying, you aced 3 or 4 different sports, and you were like completely focused. Where did that come from?
It's funny if Faf says that. I didn't necessarily ace it. He was just very, very lazy. He didn't like his schoolwork. He just wanted to be on the cricket field the whole day long and play rugby with the boys. And I just grew up sort of, I could never let something go. And schoolwork is it's an important thing.
Yeah.
So as much as I loved sports, I knew it was part of my responsibility to spend a bit of time in front of the books as well. I wasn't the top 10 in the school or anything like that with when it comes to academics, but I made sure that I sort of looked after that part of my my school years as well. It was important to me. I have different standards in my life in different areas, and I would just hate myself if I let any of that go. I'm not a perfectionist, but the responsibility part of making sure different areas in your life is in place is important to me.
I'm going to go back to an incident that happened, early on in your life about someone, you had your Proteas cap trampled upon. Can you talk us through that incident and how that impacted you?
100%. It was actually a Jonty Rhodes cap that I was 11 years old when I went to Centurion Park for the first time. I watched my first live game. I saw Sean Pollard getting his first wicket, and I remember going to the nets and I watched Jonty Rhodes hit balls in the nets. And there was someone selling caps and balls and hats like at most cricket grounds. And I saw this green and gold Jonty Rhodes cap, and I got my dad to buy it for me. And that was like my biggest treasure growing up. I had obviously, like any other sports-loving fan or a boy growing up, I had cards of players on the back of my headboard on my bed, and I had this green and gold Jonty cap. And I remember that Saturday, the next Saturday, we had a backyard game. We rolled the pitch. My brothers were there, his friends were there, or their friends were there. So I was obviously by a long way the youngest, and I would carry water for everyone, and I would just get an opportunity to field. And that made me very happy. I'm in the field, and it's one up, one hand, and I dropped one. And one of my brother's oldest friends, was actually, it's a long story, but I'm going to make it as quickly as possible. He's a left-arm fast bowler. We actually ended up playing together later on at university. He was a really skillful bowler. He was amazing, and he was bowling. I dropped the catch off his bowling, and he came to me and he said, "Take off that hat because you're not worthy of wearing that." And he sort of stepped on it, and I was broken. I was shattered. But I understood. I've always, because of my older brothers, understood that respect your elders. So I took it in a good way. I was obviously broken, but I understood that, you know what, the standards are high. If you drop a cat, someone's going to be upset. Just pick yourself up and go again, you know.
How old are you?
I was 11. Wow. Yeah, I was young, but I could play, you know. I finally got my chance to bat at the end of the day, where I faced him for the first time, and I stood up and I did pretty well. Yeah. But anyway, many years later, actually to be exact, 7, 8 years later, we played together in the first team of the university. He was in his earlier 30s, yeah. And we had a fantastic team. Faf was there, Kruger van Wyk, Jacques Rudolph. We all in one club side, so we had a very good team. And he was the guy sort of that took me under his wing coming into the university side, bowled to me in the nets. He was an incredible bowler. To this day, one of the best I've ever faced. Wow. And it was just a great learning curve. And from the age of 11, where I thought this is the biggest bully in the world, to playing together in a club team, and it was just incredible. But that's the Jonty Rhodes cap story. Yeah. From being broken to finally playing with this guy in a club side and doing well.
Amazing. It's great. It's a fantastic story. You mentioned Faf a couple of times. What was he like in school?
Yeah, we were good friends. We met when we were about 9 years old. We weren't great friends then. It was competition. You know, we had that little chest out, both of us, like first meeting.
Alpha males.
And I've heard of you, you've heard of me. So it was very awkward. We finally ended up playing together, going into high school. Also a little bit weird, but when we found each other in the A team, we became friends. We understood that we're both very competitive. We both want the same thing, and that's to win cricket games. So we had that connection, an understanding of sports, and we had a fantastic 5 years at our school. I think it's still, to this day, the most memorable 5 years of my life. Yeah.
He's always been a little bit of a late bloomer, wasn't he? Even in school, like when you read his book, you understand that, you know, there was a bit of a learning curve for him, and he felt like you were, like, even though you all were skill-wise about the same, but you were so focused and so driven that you just kind of catapulted into the biggest stage of cricket.
Yeah, and it's actually a great lesson for anyone out there listening is no one's path is the same. No one's journey is the same. Every guy is different. Yeah. Some guys get different breaks early on, different opportunities. Not that he didn't get opportunities, but his path was just destined to be different. He finally went to England, played a bit there, and I think there was a hunger and desire for him that realised, you know what, I actually want to play for South Africa. He came back. I remember him calling me and saying, listen, what do you think? I said, you are destined to play for the Proteas. Come back, come and do your thing. And it wasn't long after that. I think 6 months later, he scored some hundreds, I think 3 in a row domestically. And I was also in the ear of Graham Smith at the time saying, you see what's going on here? I'm not going to claim any of the credit. But anyway, long story short, we finally ended up playing together. And it was an incredible moment for us to find the two of us in the same team and having fun with, and giving our best for South Africa.
Yeah, what was it like though for you? As in, you were what, 18, 19 when you made your test debut?
Yeah, I was very young. I was probably not ready, definitely not ready. But
there's a guy who scored 8,000 runs and averages 50.
Those first 2 years, I was absolutely nowhere. But as I mentioned before, this self-belief and hunger and desire, I felt I was destined to be there. So even though technically I felt like, this is a bit out of my depth, it's a weird thing. I felt at home. The pace wasn't too much. The crowd didn't bother me, but I felt like technically these guys were very accurate. All of a sudden, they're around that off stump the whole time. Freddie Flintoff getting bounced, nipping it around.
Yeah.
I wasn't used to balls seaming off the deck.
Correct.
All of a sudden, bounce, nipping away, nipping back. So I felt a little bit out of my depth there with regards to accuracy and skill. But I felt at home, and this hunger just kept burning and burning. And I had a decent start, and then I had that crash in my second season.
Yeah.
And I was definitely not, I didn't have the armory to deal with that. I had no idea where to go. All of a sudden, advice from everywhere, coaches from left, right, and centre. Very confusing time, but that hunger and desire kept burning, and I found my way out of that. And I think that season, 2005-06, sort of set me up for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and what did you do differently after that?
I finally discovered that just sticking to the basics really worked. I had Jackie Rudolph giving me good advice to start writing down, keep a diary, write down some things that worked for you in the past. Finally, I dotted it down to 3 points that sort of, to the very last game, stuck with me. And that was the most basic stuff that you would ever imagine. It's quiet head, which means clear your mind when you walk out to bat. Don't overthink things. It's just you and the ball. Strong feet, meaning body language. Look the opponent in the eye. Have a good position when you're batting as well. And last thing, watch the ball. Yeah. And funny enough, the watch the ball part was a thing I sort of forgot when I was really confused. I remember walking off the field a few times thinking like, I swear I didn't see the cricket ball.
Yeah.
And the guy's, it's not like he's fast, so what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And then I realized, you know what, when you actually see the ball out of the hand of the bowler, you sort of buy yourself so much more time. Then it's just a matter of waiting for the ball. Yeah. See it and let it come to you. And I can tell you my best knocks, I've had success premeditating before, but I've had success having an absolute clear mind. And the clear mind knocks and innings are the ones that are by a country mile the most flawless knocks I've ever played in my life. Not even knowing what's going on around me, not hearing noise, just sort of being in this bubble of seeing the ball and loving the fact that I'm seeing it out of the bowler's hands. Almost sort of enjoying the fact that I know that they're not going to get me out today.
Yeah. Just brought yourself into that zone, so to speak.
I think you're programmed before you go out to bat. You know exactly what you need to do in any way. There's no need to overthink it while you're out there.
Yeah.
You just sort of just confuse yourself.
Yeah. Wow. That's some insight, man. that is great.
I'll give you one more example of that. Sydney Cricket Ground, 2015. We played a World Cup game against the West Indies.
Yeah.
And I was very nervous, very fired up. It's a must-win for us. But 3 o'clock that morning, I got really sick in my room, and I got injections and all sorts of stuff. I didn't sleep. I arrived at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and I told the coach, listen, I don't think I can warm up. I'm just going to take a nap. Ended up batting first, and I was literally sleeping before going out to bat. But my point is, there was something more important than focusing and stressing about a cricket game. I honestly felt like I couldn't play.
Yeah.
So that became the bigger matter. The fact that I could just walk out, I was happy enough that I could just play, finally, which took everything else sort of out of the equation. And I remember standing there facing my first ball, and I was like, I don't care if I get out here. I'm just going to see the ball and just like move slowly, be in my mode, you know. And it was incredible how in such slow motion everything happened that day. I could see the ball bigger. I was half asleep, full of medicine, just standing there going like, oh, this game is actually so enjoyable, it's so easy, it was so slow. And it's so difficult to get into that zone.
Yeah.
But when you're in that zone, it's so enjoyable.
I agree with you. I know what you mean when everything kind of slows down and you feel like, what's going on? I'm really enjoying this. I don't want to like overthink it, but just I want to kind of stay in the sweet spot for as long as. How much did you end up scoring in that game? I'm sorry.
I got 160 something of 60 balls. That's the other thing. It was a fast-paced energy kind of innings. Strike rate, I don't know what, but it never felt like I was
in a hurry.
I was just so relaxed and so easy. So it's a fine line, you know. You want your body to move and you want to be in the zone, but you just want the mind to be switched off. I think that's the key.
That's amazing. That is so good. But for me, when I've observed you from the outside, because I felt like we saw two AB de Villiers, you know, one in the first few years of his career and then somebody else post 2011 and 12. What happened between those two phases for you?
I think very inexperienced from 2004 to 2008. 2008, that's where the big change happened for me. I remember that's the first double 100 I got in Test cricket. I never thought I was able of getting close to 200 because I was sort of labelled as this white ball cricketer growing up in high school. White ball, fast scoring, takes on his shots, not really reliable. So 2008. I was working with JioCinema at the time, really focusing on my technique. I felt my defense was absolutely shocking. I couldn't play a front foot defensive shot purely because I was early on the ball. I hated a good length delivery because I wanted to
go at it,
quickly smother it, you know. Where I learned to really just trust your technique, trust the fact that your balance is good, and just allow it to hit your face 45-degree more or less angled bat. And I remember facing Sri Sant, who also had the ability of nipping it around. Beating the bat a couple of times, and I realized, you know what, I never pushed at that, and I started really enjoying playing a front foot defensive shot. And that was the big turning point from 2008. I think that was the foundation laid, and then 2009, 2010, I really started kicking on. That's where I started doing that, but also sort of taking the bowlers on at the same time. And the game was very enjoyable since then, knowing that my defense is in place. Now I can start discovering other areas of my game.
Right. Beautiful. And so when you look back at your Test career, you know, 8,000 runs, averaging about 50, how do you look back at it? What are your thoughts about your own Test career?
Tough one. I think incredible memories, lots of ups, lots of downs, mainly good memories. And I don't know if I should go into this, but I've always...
I would love for you to go into it.
I've always hated stats. So I looked at that 10,000 run mark and I thought I just told myself, who said that 10,000 is a number in any way? I'm going to decide for myself when I've had enough. And I felt at the time, due to many reasons, I think there's about 20 good reasons, some of them very personal, some of them not so much. I felt, you know what, it's time for me. What do I want to achieve for the last few years of my career? I wanted to play and finish at RCB and enjoy my cricket. It's always been about enjoyment. So in 2018, when I felt like, you know what, I'm probably a season or two away from 10,000 and then maybe even more, who knows. And I just felt like it's not important to me. What else do I want to achieve in Test cricket? How comfortable am I feeling in the team environment at the moment? And there's some boxes that weren't ticked, and I decided, you know what, that's time to move on. Physically, I was still there. And I saw myself to enjoy my last few years in the IPL, go to Middlesex, playing county cricket, which I've never done before, go to the Big Bash. I wanted to experience some grounds around the world, some teams, and create more friendships. And that's what I decided on for the last 3 years of my career. It's a big part of the reason why I finally just called it a day, you know. It's really tough. I mean, struggled to sleep at night, you know. I started doing some sleeping tablets at night.
What?